consent.
You have consented to record your voice with your friend Ronald.
You do not have a good singing voice, my friend. It was just a shame because we could do some duets.
Dude, it hurts. It hurts when I try to sing. Like actually try
I
to
know
sing.
it does.
It hurts. Like I'm like, oh, that is tough. That is real tough. Hey, congrats. This is episode 40 of Cutting for Sign.
Yeah, hell yeah. 40 times.
40 times.
That's pretty cool.
That's a week's worth of work we just did.
We did it in just under a year.
Just under a year.
1 week's worth of work in just under 11 months. Yeah.
That's pretty strong.
That's what they mean when they talk about white privilege.
I don't understand that at all.
Male privilege, that's what I meant. Just all the privilege talk, it's like I know that sounds kind of like
I think I see where you're going now.
That almost sounds a little bit racist. Let me clarify that.
Yeah.
Privilege, white privilege, male privilege, American privilege, youth privilege,
sure.
Middle class privilege, like all of that stuff. You and I kind of check all those boxes.
Oh, 10,000%. Yeah.
And as much as I think there's those parts of ourselves that are like, I'm not, I suffer too, which is true. Like there's a few categories you and I fall in that are not privileged categories. And, but I do think the ones that we do exist in have made our lives significantly easier than a lot of people. And one of those things has been probably time. Just having more time. That's kind of what I was saying with that.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique thing to get to do this, to get to kind of unplug away from everything. It's really hard. Yeah. I mean, I think I heard Tim Ferriss say that like there's like some crazy number of podcasts that have no more than 3 episodes.
Yeah, the podcast graveyard.
Dude, it's no joke. It's a lot of work. It's a legit amount of work that you and I put in to do this.
I feel like we've only just begun too. Like we could probably just keep doing what we're doing and gain better guests. Now, by better, I just mean like when we can probably have a better conversation with the people who are on, because you and I understand how to talk to people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That hit me this week as we've gone through really starting with Daniel Popper, and then we just talked to Babsy. Like between the two, I was really thinking like, how can I be better at talking? How can I be a better conversationalist, ask better questions, speak less, ask questions that bring out more.
What did you come up with?
Well, nothing. Obviously, you heard me. For me, the biggest one is not letting myself jump to, I've got a story about that too, kind of thing.
I don't think you're a meat monster. I don't think you do that too much.
Well, it's because I've got that shithead chained to a toilet in my brain. Like
I want to know more about that story now. Can you unchain the fool?
Yeah, I'm glad. You know what? Okay, so here's how this all ties together. Okay, so you and I have been talking a long time about like becoming more of who we are, becoming better versions of ourselves, and a big part of my journey has been recognizing all the little ways that I acted in distrust to myself, right? Like I presented an outer part of me that's not fully me. And that's a big thing that I've realized, like that's been a big part of my life.
Well, that's got to be a matter of degree, though, because I think that's human nature. Just as I understand,
I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's probably the most pervasive, singular, like individual problem that exists. Is like people are afraid of being themselves.
Well, and I don't think I mean it's a good thing to do that, because I think that tailoring subconsciously and automatically tailoring our psyche, our persona, our personality to fit other people and to not upset things. To some degree, that's a good thing, because that's a huge tool that helps all of us get along, because humans get along in massive groups. We no longer just get along in like 150 people. We now get along in millions.
I'm not talking about that. Like like that's easy. That shit's easy for me to do. I'm talking about having to say that I believe things that I did not believe. I'm talking about my Christian upbringing. I'm talking about like the family systems I operated in with my parents and my greater family. Like I'm talking about the parts of me that like didn't feel like I was allowed to be because I was afraid of rejection and abandonment from like my primary core of people.
That's what I mean. I think that the
Mm.
just normal persona that is who we are, when it's taken too far for other reasons, it turns into what you're talking about, you know?
Yeah, it does.
And it's like stripping away all that bullshit and just being yourself. And I feel like that's a lifelong process.
Well, it definitely is, and it for me, it's been in fits and starts. You know, like big chunks of, hey, it's we're getting through this. Other parts, it feels like, do I even know how to be myself? Is that even a thing? Like how do I access that
Totally.
part of me? Yeah.
That's a good call. And maybe you don't. And maybe in some ways, that's what the process is. It's not unpeeling something. It's literally learning how to,
Yeah.
who you are and
Yeah.
how to be. That's why I would love to have been an actor, because
Mm.
in the little acting I did do, you get to try on a different personality. You're encouraged to do that. And then what I found is that I would find out little things about myself that were
Mm.
latent through the character I was,
Mm. Mm.
it was like the best way to discover and actually embody in your voice and your movement who
Yeah.
you might be.
Yeah. Like our man
Anyways,
Brett Weinstein and Roy Kent.
yeah,
They're better version, better way to do your own alter ego than to act him out in a show.
exactly. Yeah, Tenacious D, Jack Black. He's
Oh
one of my
yeah.
favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because his Jack Black character is so off the cuff, rude and angry, and
Mm-hmm.
but it's like you can tell it's good natured, and he has Kyle Gass foil, and he can just like pick on Kyle, but they're really cool in real life,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
okay. But he's awful to him, and I just think that creating some sort of safe environment where you can be your dark, dirty self and bring it
Hmm.
into your persona is like really healthy.
Hmm. Hmm. You've mentioned in the past that you want to act in the future.
Strictly because of what I just told you.
Yeah.
I just think it would be a great way to express inner parts that don't get to live in this world.
Well, I think that's fascinating. I want to talk about that more, and I want to come along for the journey in this. But until then, our next guest, Jasmin Carman, is here, and
Awesome.
I'm excited about this because we're going to talk a bit more about what you and I were just talking about in a minute
Sounds
here.
great. Jasmin Carman, you are an Australian-based feminine wholeness coach and creator of Conscious Sexuality, a space of liberation, learning, and enlightenment around sexuality. Your passion is to see women thrive, create abundance, and step into their most authentic life. You help women hone their sexual energy, particularly those who experience pain during sex or have been otherwise hindered by purity culture. You believe that all of a person belongs in embracing and awakening to one's sexuality, asking oneself difficult questions, and that freedom and a new life direction can come from resolving past traumas. Welcome, Jasmin.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Jasmin, you have a different way of speaking than most of our guests. So could you tell us where you are? I'm going to guess Atlanta,
Yes.
Georgia. No?
Nope. I'm in Australia. I live about 2 hours north of Sydney in a coastal town. So that's why my accent sounds very different to you all, because I'm halfway across the world.
And I bet you're like, man, you guys' accent's terrible. I just can't even listen to you guys. What do Australians think of American accents?
Good question.
I mean, we think they're interesting because you guys have lots of different accents based on where people live.
Yeah.
Like I love a New Yorker accent. I think it's just fantastic. But then I also am quite fascinated by like a Southern accent as well.
Is that as prevalent?
I can do one if you want me to do that the rest of the episode. Just speak Southern the whole time.
Is that as prevalent in Australia? Different dialects of English? Or not dialects, but accents?
I don't think it is. There are some different twangs that can come through, but all in all, I think we all kind of sound the same.
I wonder why that's so prevalent in the States. And it's kind of that way in England too, right?
Yeah, it's really that way in England. Yeah.
I wonder why that is. Maybe it's the diversity of culture. I don't know.
Good question.
I mean, we still have a lot of diversity here as well. So you do get like ethnic English accents or Asian English accents and things like that. But in terms of kind of like the typical Australian accent, I feel like it's pretty much the same mostly everywhere.
I lived in Geelong for like, I don't know, the better part of a year. You familiar with Geelong?
Yeah. Yeah, that's in Victoria.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very, very formative part of my life. I was like, I feel like I discovered myself there as more than in any other time in my life. It was amazing.
That's awesome. I love that.
Jasmin, I didn't know something about you. I knew what you did. I've even spoken to you, but I listened to your podcast and listened to the episode where Dan, your husband, right? That's his name?
Yeah. Yes.
Interviewed you. And as much as Daniel, my co-host, and I would like to talk about the difference between Australians and Americans.
I was just a little vamping. We were vamping.
I could get it all into it. I could root around in it, as Daniel says. Your overcoming story, I don't know if that's the way to phrase it, but your healing journey, I knew of it, but I didn't know kind of some of its past stuff. And so why don't you kind of introduce yourself around that? And we told everybody what you do, and then kind of maybe this is your origin story, since every superhero needs one.
Yeah, sure. So I guess that's right. Everyone kind of starts somewhere in when they find their passions and where they sort of head in life. And for me, a lot of my healing journey kicked off when I started working through a physical healing journey, which was when I had been experiencing painful sex. So specifically, I had a condition which is called vaginismus. And so for those who don't know what vaginismus is, it's an involuntary contraction of your vaginal muscles. So meaning when you go to attempt any kind of penetration, when it comes to sex, that's not possible. Or it's just like severely painful. And I experienced that from the get-go of getting married. Like when my husband and I got married, we were both very heavily in church and didn't have sex before we got married. So then when we got married, this was this sort of big hurdle that we didn't anticipate having to overcome. And it was something that I pushed to the side for about the first 6 years of our marriage, because I didn't know what to do. I felt a lot of shame around it. I didn't feel like I had people that I could talk to about it. And so we kind of just pushed it under the rug and were like, yep, okay, that's there, but we don't really know what to do. Let's just leave it there. And so then it wasn't until I hit a point where I was obviously ready. My body was ready. I was ready. And I was like, I need to do something about this. And it was actually because I was listening to a podcast by Ron, yourself, and Morgan. We were on a road trip in New Zealand, and we had downloaded all your like Jesus Tuxedo podcasts.
Sexy Tuxedo Jesus.
That's the one.
Podcast name ever.
Yes, exactly. And Morgan mentioned the term vaginismus and then described it. And I was like, I think that's what I have.
Wow.
And it was really frustrating because we didn't have any reception or anything like that. And I was like, I need to get on Google.
get this sorted.
Yeah. And so from there, that kind of like spiraled into me going, okay, I think I have a name for this condition. I think I'm ready to do something about it, which sort of equaled in me talking to friends and then going to see a doctor and then starting a physical healing journey with it. But then at the same time, because it is also a mental journey too, there's a lot of mental and emotional stuff that comes with that. I needed to work through that side of things as well. And it was at that point then when I also really lent into Morgan and what she was doing with her Feminine Wholeness School and just her coaching program that she had running at that time too. And so that's then what sort of really kicked off, I guess, me stepping into my authentic self, because I was on the journey and fixing something that, like, I don't want to say I was broken, but I was still fixing something that wasn't right. It wasn't normal what I was experiencing. So there was a lot of physical things that I did. And then also I partnered it with a lot of emotional and mental work.
Yeah. You said a phrase that I want to hone in on a little bit. And that was your authentic self. Well, first of all, before we jump totally into that, like if I'm surprised how common vaginismus is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've spoken to a fair amount of people, like a good amount of folks who've struggled with it in relationship, out of relationship. And I love that you are talking about it, and you're making a thing out of it, like a real, like kind of starting point, conversation starter for people's healing journey. And I want to commend you for being brave and sharing and letting that shine out of you. That's so great. But getting back to your authentic self, that's exactly what Daniel and I were talking about before you got on, is recognizing, or the moment you recognize that you've not been your authentic self, and then trying to find the steps that lead you back to you. I have one friend who calls it restoring his soul. Like he feels like he's on that journey right now.
Yeah.
And so, kind of and I'll give you some examples before I let you just like run with this, but I know, I don't even know if I would have called myself a deconstructed Christian, because I don't know if I ever constructed it. Like, I don't know if I actually ever believed in a lot of the stuff that I was told I had to believe in. I said I did. I acted like I did. From the outside, it probably looked like I did. But all those years later, I'm like, oh shit, I was like just living this weird lie that fit me so well that I could like operate it. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I'm like, oh, I was frankly being very dishonest. And I'm trying really hard to notice in me where I haven't been my most authentic self. So it sounds like this was like one of the threads you pulled in your life on the journey back to your authentic self. What was that like? And then what else helped you along that journey?
Yeah. I feel like as much as going through the condition and having to go through that like really sucked, I don't know if I'd be where I was today if I didn't have that experience. And at the same time, I'm sure I would have gotten there at some point in the end. But I feel like because it was so much around my sexuality, because it was so much like this vaginismus kind of like hindered my sex life physically. And then it also affected me in how I expressed myself sexually. Like how do I be a sexual person when, especially because the language that had been taught to me was like sex equals like penetrative sex. Like that's what sex is. And so I feel like that's the initial thread that I pulled. I really started to go, well, what is sex? Like, what is a sex life? How do I express myself sexually? What does that mean for me? And especially having experienced a version of purity culture here in Australia too. There was this part of me that I had on the inside that I knew I wanted to explore more, but I never felt like I had the tools to start to explore further. And I'd also never given myself permission. I felt like I had to be and look a certain person to fit into the category of Christian, to fit into the category of wife, and so those kind of, I guess, stereotypes or stigmas. And there was this part inside of me that always knew that this is not what I viewed my version of who I wanted to be, but I had been pushed into it through years of going to church, through the years of the language that had been taught. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pull this string and let's see what happens.
You survived. You didn't die.
Yeah.
I think
it felt really, really scary at the time.
I know. Yeah.
Because I felt like I was unraveling everything I'd ever learned.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we recorded those episodes was kind of our formal exit out of Christian culture. And it was terrifying, man. Like I had a really, really hard time with that. And Daniel, I don't know if I've said this phrase to you before or said something like it, but a part of the reason it's so scary for someone to leave some form of Christianity or church or whatever is that the silent judgment is not only are you out of the group, like you're out of Christianity, like you're going to hell, like you're going to die the eternal death. And And that is like a really weird superstition that wants to latch on really what like it wants to hang on so much.
Yeah, if someone has learned when they're a kid that there's a hell and that if you don't behave a certain way, you're going to it, that I would think that that would be pretty brutal to at a deep level let go of and believe in something else, you know.
It's profoundly difficult at first. The other thing I wanted to just give a little note on is she mentioned something called purity culture. Purity culture is like this idea that there's a really specific way sex can be and should be and has to be in order for it to be acceptable in Christian culture. And that is, generally speaking, no sex before marriage. Sex should only be done between a man and a woman in the context of marriage, full stop. And that's kind of it. I mean, that's like not much else, right? But it is
I would think
real...
no freaky sex would be somewhere in there.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot about
Just
all
shooting
that.
from the hip. That seems like
No freaky That's good. That's good.
Great.
Yeah. So you pulled that thread and it all started to unravel, and you are now feeling like there's more at stake, right? It's not just your Christian experience, it's like your family and friends that you grew up with and the culture you're a part of. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So at that point that I sort of pulled that initial thread, we hadn't been going to church for probably about a year, or maybe it was 2 years. I can't really remember, because the community that we were in didn't feel like a community. So we were like, well, we're not really getting anything from this. We've got plenty of friends who don't go to church. Let's just hang out with them more, because that's giving us more value. So we hadn't been in a church environment for a while, a typical church environment. So the big thing was really around like, how do I start to re-express myself? Like, how do I begin to redefine myself as who I want to be and not freak my family out?
How'd you do that? What was your baby steps? And then finally the grand reveal.
Oh man, it was rough. It was really rough. Like, I started my Instagram account initially as a way for me to express and just talk about the vaginismus journey that I was going through.
Are you talking about your personal account or the other one?
No, my other one. So at Conscious Sexuality.
Yep.
But I blocked all family members from viewing it.
Okay.
Because I was like, I'm not ready to tackle this yet, but I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'll block the people that I don't want to view this and,
smart,
do what I feel like is comfortable for me.
Yeah.
And then there was a time where my parents-in-law, like a friend of a friend or something, had the account recommended to them or something. And like, it felt like all hell broke loose, literally.
Wow.
And it's hard to navigate, because like by then I'm like 27, 28 years old. Like, I'm a fully grown woman. I've been married for like 7 years, and I've got like parents-in-law coming at me saying like, what are you doing? This is not good. And I'm like, I'm not a child. Like,
yeah.
I'm literally my own person. Like, you can't tell me what to do.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And they just didn't like what I was doing. I had started expressing myself in a really different way. I had done by then Morgan's sexy selfie course. So I was kind of doing the
Excellent.
sexy selfie thing.
Good. Yes. Every woman should.
Right. And that was my way of like experimenting. I was experimenting in how to express myself. And I was recording it online.
What else did you do? I think that's Ronald and I were talking about this. We speak for a few minutes before you come on, and or before the guest comes on, and we were talking about just that, like different ways to express different parts of our personality. And what an interesting process that is, because it's probably going to feel kind of awkward at first, even though it's, quote, more authentic, but it's also an experimental process. So maybe part of us isn't doing that in a way that is more authentic. It's just a step along the way. It's such an interesting process. I'm really fascinated by it. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's something that, again, I felt like I always wanted to be how I wanted to be able to express myself, but I didn't feel like I had the tools or like the permission slip sort
Yeah.
of to use that way as a way of expression. And so I did the sexy selfie course with Morgan, and felt like I then was like, oh, cool, I have these tools. Like, I love taking photos. Like, it's so fun. Let's kind of try and like go outside of the border a little bit here, and let's push the limit as to how I would normally take a photo.
Huh.
And a lot of the time it was just for fun, it was just for me. But then as I started sharing and expressing more online and breaking down the stigma around expressing myself as a sexual being, I was using some of those photos that I took to post on Instagram, because I wanted other women to have permission too.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, if I'm going through this, then other people are going through this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want to just limit it to like my photo gallery on my phone where then no one saw it. I wanted to show that there is freedom in this unique way of taking selfies and dressing up or dressing down or not dressing at all, like just those kinds of things. And it just felt like that practice in itself was a huge permission slip for me, but also really taught me how to start to express myself sexually more.
Yeah, it's like, it's really easy, I think, for us to say, oh, that person's taking a sexy picture of themselves. How arrogant or selfish or, maybe even narcissistic. Like, people start throwing around some pretty heavy words, and I think that you can, like, if a child does stuff like that, we look at it maybe more like it's play and expression. And I don't think that needs to change into adulthood. Certainly people can do that too much, or in a way where you can start to tell, maybe you just get a feel that it's maybe not coming from the best place. But I would think, and maybe there's more of that than what we're talking about, but I don't know. I don't really know that. I tend to be like, you go, person, like, get it out there, and to be honest, it makes me want to do that too,
Right.
and what maybe confidence or good feelings I might get, from that. I think that men, or male identifying people, or people closer to the male end of the spectrum of gender, maybe could play with that more too,
I think that's a really interesting point that you brought up, which is it's about play.
Mm.
And I think as we often enter into adulthood, we lose that because we get told we're meant to behave and act in a certain way. So we lose that play aspect. We lose that inner child aspect. And that was exactly what Morgan was trying to teach. She has been teaching for so long as well. She's been saying, you don't have to just act this certain way because you're an adult now. Like, you can have fun, you can play, you can, anyone who's an avid follower of Morgan knows how much she loves to play. Like, she puts the wigs on, she does anything and everything. Like, she just goes for it. And that she has been my inspiration, honestly, like, for so long, because I'm like, I want to be like that. I want to be carefree. I don't want to give a shit. I hope I can swear on this podcast.
You can definitely fucking swear on this podcast.
No, I can't believe it. This is bullshit. Hey, hold real quick though, Jasmine, question for Ronald.
Yeah.
Because Morgan does do that type of imagery pretty consistently, does she get a lot of flack for that from anybody?
Not anymore. At the beginning, yeah.
Really?
At the beginning, especially so I had like left Christianity in 2004, and I wrote this great letter to my family and my mom, like, I'm out of the family, I'm out of church, I'm out of the country, I'm gone, don't contact me, I'll call you. And it was one of the best. Yeah, it was really such a great liberating experience. And I think if anyone is listening and you've got like some toxic shit in your life, family in particular, that is like, you can see the evidence of it not helping you, like, get those divorce papers in order for your family and get that shit out of your life. Because it was a huge boost in my like emotional, physical, spiritual health.
But a side note is that you're now like close to your mom.
I'm now close to my mom. I feel like I've been able to process and forgive a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I say all that to say, I had this like kind of like reconnection with Christianity, maybe 3 years after that. So maybe around 2007, 8 or so, 2008. And Morgan joined me in that. And she does not have a Christian background at all. And so it's all kind of like watching her navigate that is like, oh, I don't believe that, but okay, like everyone seems nice. I'll kind of go along with it. And she kind of did the like cute Christian wife thing for a minute. And so when she really, we did that for a few years and here in Portland. And then as it all began to unravel, number one, she just did not have any problem leaving church. Like she was like, this is easy. Like that, like I don't, especially when it came to like LGBTQ issues, especially when it came to like, there's only one way to get to heaven. All those kinds of like big primary pillars of Christianity. She had no problem. It was like easy as pie for her to walk away. And for me, I was like still like a wild animal somehow. It just scared me to it was almost like I was a captive animal trying to get back in the wild. And that was with the difficult transition. And in those early days, yeah, Daniel, like people did talk shit and people did say things. And I had like even a pastor like kind of pull me aside and be like, get your wife in order. And I remember looking at him. He's not exactly what he said. It was the gist of what he said.
Yeah.
And I was like, she's in order. This is her life. Like she's helping people a lot more than you are. So I've always celebrated her. And the funny thing, I think the irony though, is that I don't feel as near as free and wild and playful as she does. And even last night, like she just took off to a retreat with some girls, and she bought all these like fun outfits to wear with these girls. Some of them were really sexy, and I'm like, hell yeah, let's look at this, lady. But the other thing, I was a little jealous. I was like, I want some fun outfits. I want to dress fun. I want to have a good time. I want to go play. Like I want to go out to some clubs. And I want to do all this stuff. So we were trying to figure out how I could make that happen. Part of it is like I just get too tired thinking about what to wear, and so I just like default to the same shit all the time.
Well, that's a good point. I have noticed that like for me, any step along this path, I'm curious what you think too, Jasmine, path of authenticity, like, and I think of authentic self as more of like it's like I'm stepping into that more and more, as opposed to like, now I'm my authentic self. I feel like that term, I have a little problem with authentic self because it's just a little bit clunky, but I love the gist of it. And on that path, I find it all work, but very satisfying work. It takes me more effort to make my house a little bit nicer. It takes me more effort to dress up, to eat better food, to like basically everything that's more aligned with my more authentic self is a pain in the ass, at least at first and for a while. And so if I were to like take some selfies or something like that, like posting things, I don't know, it's all work. And I think that it's okay that it's work, but I think I wonder if some people might find that it's challenging, as it puts them off, because it's like, oh, it's not easy. I'm not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it should be easy if it's right. And it's like, not all the time, sometimes, but sometimes it's the total opposite.
That's
it's
right.
like hard. It feels awkward. It feels wrong, but that's a good sign.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think that's such a valid point. Is I guess sometimes people who do sort of follow the journey to being more authentic or more themselves, whichever term they want to use, they think it's going to be this easy journey because all of a sudden they're aligned and they're like on the path that they're meant to be on. But there are going to be conflicts that come up along the way, whether it is from family because you're changing who you are and who they perceive you to be. You're challenging their beliefs and what they think is right and true because you're adapting to something else that you believe is right and true. Taking selfies is not easy because you feel awkward, you feel vain maybe, but all of these things start to become easier with practice. And that was what I found is, yes, it was hard work. Like I dedicated probably like 2 or 3 years of my life to like hardcore, like morning meditations or weekly selfie practices, reading all the books, like ingesting all the information so that at some point it would become like first nature.
Wow. What other things did you do during that 2 or 3 years?
Well, one of the biggest things that I did was work alongside Morgan with her programs that she had been offering, because I wanted what she had. I wanted the freedom that she expressed and how she did it. And I felt like she had the tools that I needed to be able to get on that path and navigate that. So I was heavily invested in that. And then I was also like buying books. I was like challenging my beliefs around Christianity. So I was also in the middle of like deconstruction. I was challenging my thoughts around how I perceive the world. So also like really a lot around LGBT QAI plus people, the non-binary people, how they perceive the world. I was also starting to realize that I needed to also pay a bit more attention to like justice and caring for the world and the environment and like all these kinds of things that I knew I cared about, but I wanted them to be more prevalent in my life. I wanted them to be not just something that I knew about that I should be doing, but something that I like consciously took on board and decided like these are the things that I want to try and make as to like who I am as a person. And I guess that's why I also that's why I have my name, I guess, as Conscious Sexuality, because a lot of what I did was bringing everything that I wanted into my conscious. And I feel like a lot of it had been sitting quite dormant in my subconscious for quite a long time. And I was at that point where I was like, no, I want it conscious now. Like I want it to be at the beginning. And one of the terms that I gave myself was I wanted to be consciously embodied. And when I say consciously embodied, I guess it's quite a broad term because it means whatever I bring into my conscious is something that I want to like integrate or embody into my life, into who I am, into how I treat people, how I perceive the world. And that like is kind of like this 2 to 3 year space that I took. I was at that time, I was like also working in admin. So I was catching a bus to work. I was listening to like 2 podcasts a day. Like I was like deep in trying to like rearrange everything I'd ever known, basically.
It's interesting because you're phrasing something in a way that I haven't really heard. And that's that you're wanting to make subconscious processes or programs or just your inner world, your subconscious inner world, making it conscious. And then but I think the way I've looked at it and your way of phrasing that is helping me and look at it at a different angle is that I've got subconscious world that I don't like the way it's happening, and I need to slowly affect it and rearrange that landscape within, Can you speak to the difference maybe between the two things we're talking about, or the same thing that's been talked about from different angles?
Yeah. So I guess like with my knowledge, I guess that I have around the conscious and the subconscious, I think subconscious is often things that we do maybe without thinking, or it's kind of like that internal programming that is there and affects maybe how we perceive the world or our belief systems. And it's something that exists there that like we don't necessarily have like I'm just trying to think of the right word to say, like we don't necessarily question the subconscious. It's kind of, it could be these things that are just there and we know they're there, or things that are within our subconscious slip out before we've had a chance to review it in our conscious first.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so I think then the conscious is when we decide to on purposely choose to believe something or on purposely choose to change a way of thinking. So I think that's how I view the conscious and the subconscious kind of ways of thinking about things. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it does. I think we're speaking around an interesting topic. Like I was writing this story last year, and it was taking place in a world that was representative of the writer's subconscious. And I played around with the rules of the subconscious world and the rules of the conscious world. And I had a character go from the conscious world, go down or go into the subconscious landscape. And one of the things that I was playing with is that everything was automated down there. It didn't have choice, And I think it's very interesting when we send one of those little envoys down into our subconscious world, and to some extent have an effect, and we bring choice into an automated world, we got to start changing the landscape, changing things that happen. But I liked what you said, which is like, you were kind of speaking of the there's subconscious aspects that are good, like shadow aspects, you know, which is kind of maybe what we're talking about a little bit, that need to live, and they're kind of living in maybe a more murky, unformed way, and we want to get them out into the world in a way that works in our world too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
definitely.
Another way of, and maybe you said this, but it was going through my head, so apologies if I'm just repeating exactly the words you said a few minutes ago, but I often think of it as like the default mode of you know, it's like we it's like from the factory, it's set this way. Obviously that factory is our young childhood and upbringing and all those things, but it's you know, we're not even aware. I know one of the things I wrestled with a long time was this, like a continuous feeling of guilt all the time. All the time I felt guilty. And part of it was, it dawned on me actually earlier this week, or maybe the weekend, where I was like, oh, someone told me, you know, in formative years of my life, that I'm a bad person, that I'm bad. And that the only way to be good is to accept Jesus Christ into my heart. And that's it. And you have to say a certain set of words in a certain way, or otherwise it doesn't work, which sounds like fucking black magic to me.
Right.
and then every week from then was like, what did you let in your life that broke that magic spell? And you've got to come up, you know, you've got to have some kind of new transformative experience with Jesus at the altar. There's all kinds of different language. Each church has their own like weird language around it. But I think, fuck, I went through, you know, 2 decades of that, like all the time, 3 days a week, I'm hearing some version of that. No wonder I feel bad all the time, because I've been told that it's normal to feel bad, and that you have to do this magical thing to make the bad go away, and the bad never went away.
Ron, if you had to put a number on it, 0% to 100%, how much would you say that voice still exists?
Oh, it's still, oh yeah, man, he loves hanging out with me. It's really really common still, and I have to like have a conversation with him. So I've got Ronnie, Ron, and Ronald that I kind of like call on, different parts of me that like they might need to hear something, and they might need to be soothed, or they might need to be taught a lesson. What they don't need is to be told they're bad for acting however they were acting.
Whoa.
What they do need is to be told that they were just trying their best with what they had, with the knowledge that they had, and that there's a better way, and we get to explore that better way together. We may not know what that is, but I'm dedicated to helping you find it out. And that has been like a profound, I mean, like life-altering shift in me. That has,
you've never shared that with me.
Look at this.
Ron,
look
and
at this.
That's very sweet.
Jasmine, you didn't know this, but this is also our 40th episode, so we have like a little celebration to do as well. And
it's fun.
So the podcast has reached like midlife.
It does.
That depends on when the podcast is going to die.
Never. That's when it's going to die. Always.
If it goes to 500 episodes, we're still Ronnie.
Ronnie. Little Ronnie, sperm Ronnie, still just like swimming, trying to find a place.
Ron.
Dude, did you say Ron?
I did.
I've told you about that, right?
No.
What? My best friend in Taiwan, down the block with his twin sister Taiwana, called me Ron.
Oh.
That is like, what?
I was just trying to come up with a even younger than Ronnie name for Ron.
Yeah, well, there was little Ronnie, and then there was Ron for a few years when I lived on the block with those guys.
Ron is like, Ron's like 12.
He was
might be
like 6 to 8, and kind of a punk. Like, yeah, did some bad shit.
Ron needs to live still. Don't feel bad about it, Ron. You get to live. You could be a punk.
I was going to ask you, Jasmine, how did Dan do with this, your husband, and all this? I mean, you guys like courted and married in a culture that is like this. In order to be accepted, it's got to fit in this container.
Yeah.
I got the feeling listening to Dan interview you that he was been along for the ride, has been very supportive, and obviously loves you very much. I know I wouldn't have a job unless a lot of the men whose wives have been working with my wives like needed help also going through some kind of transformation. So what was his process like?
Yeah. It's interesting because I often reflect on his process, and I stop and I feel grateful a lot because it could have gone really badly. In terms of like, he could have not at all supported this journey that I wanted to go on. He could have thought I'd absolutely lost the plot, like who knows, but he really did just roll with it, like honestly, and that is a lot of credit to his personality just in general. He is a very roll with it kind of guy.
Did you say lost the plot? Like the plot of the story? Is that what that phrase is?
Oh, maybe that's an Aussie term.
You've never heard that phrase, man?
No, like lost the plot, like we've lost the plot of the story.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. Sorry. Just wanted to catch that. Lost the plot. I'm going to use that. That's a good one.
Go for it.
Keep going. Okay.
So he's a very relaxed, very chill person. Nothing stresses him out. Like, I don't think I've ever seen him stressed.
Wow.
Should we have
and I know some people could probably see that as a red flag, but like, he's really like, things don't worry him. And when I started on this journey, which was from like the vaginismus side of things, he was there. He was always supportive. He's always been supportive in that side of things as well. A lot of that initial physical journey was about me learning, it was rewiring my sexuality for pleasure. And so he was really supportive in that. He was never the kind of person who would say, well, you're just like withholding, or I deserve this, or I deserve that. Like, he was always really gentle, really caring, really patient. And then when I really started kind of the beliefs and the breakdown, the deconstruction side of things, again, he just like rolled with it. And weirdly, he was on a similar journey at the same time too. A lot of the time I would bring up a topic and I'd be like, hey, I listened to this podcast today and they suggested this concept, or they've broken down, this idea that got taught to us all throughout, church and Christianity, and they've broken it down into this other thought. What do you reckon about that? And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's cool. Like, or he'd be like, yeah, I was thinking about something similar about that the other day. And it was a lot of like, there was a lot of coincidental things where I was working through something and I'd flag it with him and he'd be like, yeah, I was actually thinking about that already. Or yeah, that makes sense. And whilst we were both in the church very heavily growing up, like, he comes from a very Christian family, I come from a very Christian family. He's always been very carefree, very, like, yes, he's been in the beliefs of the church, but I don't think he ever really identified with them in the way that most people do.
Yeah.
So changing a lot of his perspective on things was not really a big deal for him.
Sounds like he might have been more in touch than some of us with his authentic self. Like belief didn't mean identity, or entertaining an idea didn't mean an identity.
Correct.
Jealous.
That is, that is one thing that, as I've gone on this journey, I've gone, well, maybe you need to work on something. Like, maybe there's something that you need to reshape. And he's like, no, I'm cool. Like, I'm good.
You're like, actually, I agree.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm like, are you sure? Are you okay? There's no underlying trauma there from something that you need to work through.
Gotta be something wrong with you, you son of a bitch.
So he really has like, it's been really nice because I feel like I've been through a lot. And so it's been nice that he's just kind of been this rock there, rolling as I've been going through things, like not feeling, he's always been a really confident, independent person. His identity has never been in what he thinks or does. When I started, you know, my Conscious Sexuality Instagram and started talking about our sex life online and started being, I guess, more provocative, if you really want to use that word. He was like, I don't care. Like, you do you, you know?
Yeah.
And that was one thing that we sort of did come across is people were like, yeah, but why would you want your wife showing herself that way online? And he's like, well, like there's things that are for us and there's things that are for others. Like, you know, we had discussions about boundaries, like what he was comfortable with me sharing and what he wasn't comfortable with me sharing. Like, and I think that's an interesting thing is a lot of people don't see those conversations. So they just assume that there's a line that's being crossed or something. Whereas it's like, well, you're not in this marriage for a reason. Like, this is our relationship.
Well, you're not in this marriage for a reason. Get the fuck out of here. Getting in my marriage.
It's an interesting statement.
Yeah. There's layers to that. I like it.
I know. Part of me wants to unpack and just like play around with that one line, but
that's good. That's good. Let's keep moving.
Like there's a non-monogamy joke in there, and maybe there's
very monogamous. We are.
Yeah, I get it.
So in terms of how Dan coped with it all, he just very much went with it. And if he ever had a problem with something or felt concerned about something, we would just talk about it. And so that in itself took our relationship to whole new levels because we learned how to navigate and grow together and evolve together. I mean, we got married when we were barely 21, like babies.
The odds are not good. I too got married that young and was divorced by 25, I think.
Well, didn't you also get married when you were 19, Jasmine? Didn't I read that on your bio?
Nope.
I thought it said that you were in a relationship when you were 19 and then it ended and then you met your husband after that.
Yes. I did have a relationship when I was 19. Wasn't married or anything. It was just a dating relationship.
Okay. I misread.
Yeah.
Can I ask you just to get a real clear, like fine point on it? Mm-hmm. Did you completely heal from vaginismus? Is that what it's called?
It is called that. And yes, I did.
It sounded like it's something that you were experiencing for many years. It sounds incredible to hear that someone can heal from something that's so chronic and mysterious. And I'm assuming that you thought at that time it was going to be for your whole life. Yeah. Can you just tell a little bit? I feel like that's a very valuable experience to have gone through.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess 2 reasons I feel like why I experienced vaginismus. One was because I had an accident when I was 9 years old where I fell into the edge of a pool and I cut my perineum.
Ow. Oh my God. Ow.
Correct. So 9 years old and I had to go to hospital and have surgery. I had to be stitched up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the age of my daughter right now. Like I can't imagine how like traumatizing it'd be for her. Yeah.
Extremely traumatizing.
Yeah.
So you've got like 9-year-old, you've got doctors looking at your vulva, examining, trying to do it. And then you've got to go under anesthetic and get stitched up, like big deal. And then the second is, I believe there is a portion of the purity culture, sort of Christianity side of things that also affected my sexuality. But from a real physical perspective, my body held the trauma from the accident.
Is that the idea that around in cases of vaginismus, I'm assuming that there are many ways for it to manifest itself, but is it like a tightening of a lot of the muscles of like maybe the pelvic floor or things like that?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So like our pelvic floor has like there's so many muscles in the pelvic floor. Which hold it all together. And then again, sort of really specifically, you do have muscles, which is your vaginal canal, which like leads up to your cervix and then your uterus. So it's that section where normally people are, that's your vaginal canal is where people are doing penetrative sex or using toys and things like that. And so it's at that point of insertion so basically my body remembered that last time something was at that area, it was really painful and it hurt. And so my body was protecting me.
Yeah.
It was like, no, last time this happened, it actually really hurt. So we don't want to do this again. But that didn't manifest itself until I was 21.
Oh. Oh, you didn't experience any symptoms is that kind of because you weren't having penetrative sex until then?
Yeah, correct. And then also just as a teenager, like I never used tampons or anything like that as well. So
Oh.
I never ever inserted anything because I
Whoa.
was a good Christian girl.
Oh.
Until I got married. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, why can't I have sex?
Is
And
that part of
I got to say this real quick, Daniel. And that's like the part of the faith journey that hurts especially bad, is that you did all the right things.
Right.
And you were told if you do the right things, then holy shit, marriage, sex can be amazing. It's gonna
magic.
Yeah, it's gonna blow your mind. Like we know the secret. The world doesn't know the secret, and then you get there and you're like, no, this sucks. This sucks bad.
Right. Really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, with that said though, and I'm not playing devil's advocate
Are
necessarily.
you trying to play God's advocate right now? You're trying to speak?
Well,
Just go for it.
I'm not Christian. And to be honest, when Christianity comes up on this podcast, I always feel a little bit uncomfortable because I don't want to put people off, because there's a lot of people who like hear Christianity and they're like, fuck that, and I think that there's a healthy expression of Christianity. I know both of you know this. I'm not saying anything new, but I am legitimately curious about, not for my own wanting to take on this religion or be part of this religion, but I am curious about healthfully expressed Christianity, because I do believe it is any religion can work. The term religion, as I understand it, comes from the Latin religios, which just means to relink. So we're relinking to that creator, the thing, the greater part beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I fully believe that, but that's just kind of where I generally have come from for the last decade or two. And so I think that there's a lot of different ways to relink, and we call these things religions.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be abused at times, and by some people, and not. And it's kind of like a spectrum. You have a million different expressions of a religion through a human life. And so I am curious about a healthfully expressed Christianity. And I imagine that a person could have a sexually, what am I trying to say? It's like almost like, I wonder if there are people who are generally just not that sexual, maybe, and they are also Christian, and so they had a fine Christian life, and they actually did follow the rules, like the ones you're talking about. Because I don't want to just throw all these people into that. They're definitely suppressed, and they should be like we. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting topic.
I appreciate you wanting to bring some what's the word I'd use for that? I don't know if I'd use the word balance.
Nuance.
Thank you. That's the word. Jasmine. By the way, Morgan says hello. I texted her a photo of us talking. So
that's how well Ron pays attention when we're talking.
Yeah, what'd you guys say?
Texting.
It's right at the beginning, okay, guys?
Jeez, I didn't realize I was that boring.
Never mind. Oh, I was gonna say I have met people who did do all the right stuff, and like, I can't say, man, I don't know. Like, they're pretty good. Like, they're not mad at their experience growing up. They don't have a lot of resentment, and I wish more people had those experiences where religion, and I know I've said this on the podcast before, my experience in AA, one of the things they say in the big book of AA is we look to religion where it is right. And I think there is often places, any religion, and in my experience, Christianity is right. Like the idea of forgiveness is a powerful tool. And when we put that in place in our relationships and to ourselves, it changes things. That is profound. I don't understand how that works. I think leaning on something outside of yourself is profound, and learning how to speak that language within yourself so that you can feel that thing lean back is a really crazy experience and something I still practice.
Mm.
I just now realize like one of the things I did as a kid was I gave myself permission to be sexual. And by kid, I mean a teenager.
Mm.
Like I lost my virginity like 14 years old. I was like, oh, I'm just going to be a normal teenager. That's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a normal teenager. I'm not going to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And even though I felt bad about other things going on in my life because Christianity, I don't know why. I just was like, I'm not going to feel bad about this.
Yeah.
And I think that actually helped me as I went into adulthood, like make decisions that were healthy, that were actually healthy decisions, sexually speaking, rather than frantic, right? Like I got like, this has got to happen because it's never going to happen again, or what other opportunity is going to come along, or out of fear or judgment to myself or any of those things. Like it just, and it was, I'm pretty proud of myself for that kind of thing, to be honest.
Well, that's good. I think it's interesting.
Pride becomes
point.
before the fall, says the Bible.
I just wanted to throw a little shame on you so you didn't get too cocky. No,
dude, Ronald is like just dodges all that stuff. Ronald's got a black belt in anti-shame.
Sorry, you were saying, Jasmine.
I was just gonna say, like, I like that you gave yourself permission as a teen to do what you felt was best for you, essentially. Because I think I look back on my journeys in Christianity and it was very much led by what others thought were best for me.
Yeah.
Which is what I really struggle with in Christianity, is someone else is always telling you what you should be doing. And I feel like I wish I had stood up for myself more, or I had the confidence to, I guess, create a bit of a more independent sense of self growing up, because I yearned for that. That was within me. I felt it a lot growing up. I felt it from, restrictions that my parents put on me as a teenager and the rules that they had and things like that. And they meant well, like they're not bad people. They were just doing what they felt was right for me. But one thing that I didn't feel equipped in was learning how to think for myself, or learning how to say, okay, cool, I get that you want me to do that, but actually what's best for me is doing this. And the reason I didn't do that, which I feel is really sad, is because of fear of what was going to happen if I decided to defy my parents.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the hellfire and brimstone. It's like you get cast in the outer darkness, right?
Right.
Even if your parents telling you like, we love you, you're going to be okay, there's still that like weird hook from the narrative of the event. I wouldn't call it Christianity, like evangelical Christianity, or charismatic Christianity, or something like that, that has a real, like they own the fucking like rule book on who's in and who's not in. Yeah. I had another question around when you started this process of releasing the fear, guilt, and shame around your sexuality, expressing yourself sexually. It tends to be that when you start to like turn over one leaf, like you realize, oh man, this doesn't stop. I've got to like keep turning them over. There's more threads to pull. Was there anything else that was like as either, I don't know if anything could be as profound as the healing journey you went on, which is amazing, but was there anything else that was like really challenging to you personally that you're like, man, I can't believe I'm facing this, and I can't believe I'm letting this go or walking away from, or some version of that?
I never felt sad about what I was walking away from. I always felt relief.
Yeah.
Because I had known for so long, in my subconscious, in my deep inner self, that the path that I was on was not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to leave that path.
Yeah. Well said.
So honestly, like none of it felt sad to leave. It felt like a breath of fresh air. It felt like a coming home to myself, to who I always really desired to be, just to have the freedom to think however I wanted, to do whatever I wanted, to explore thoughts and concepts and not have to necessarily attach to them, but just have the freedom to read about it and go, oh, that's an interesting perspective. Cool. whereas the Christian belief that I was brought up in was very confined. It was like, well, you can only read these things, you can only listen to these things,
Yeah.
you can't do anything else off that path, because if you do, you're going to open a door to the devil, and then you're going to like become possessed or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like so fucked up.
That's her professional and technical take on
Correct.
on how that.
All fucked up.
Yes, when I get those, like every once in a
so
while,
fucked
I'll be like doing the dishes or something normal, and I'll have a memory from growing up around that kind of stuff and all those rules, and I'm like, wow, that is abusive. Like that was terrible. That's a really fucked up thing to make.
Don't try to put all those words to it. Next time, just go mutter to yourself. That's like so fucked up.
Yeah.
It's like that.
I do it. I say that sentence a lot. I read something or I learn something new, and I look at my husband and I'm like, this is just fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's amazing. I really appreciate you coming today, Jasmin. Thank you so much.
Actually, Jasmin,
go ahead, Daniel.
I would like to, can I ask you for some advice?
Sure.
Oh, we should do this more often. Let's ask our guests for advice. Yeah, like our big hairy one. Like we
challenge
really
to Ronald and Daniel every show. By the end of it, come up with some advice.
See what we can get out of this.
Ron would just be like, I don't have any advice to ask, but I have some to give for y'all.
That's just exactly right.
Because he's like so fucked up.
Okay, here's how fucked up that is. Somebody just texted me before this call and said they were sick. And instead of going, I'm sorry you're sick, I fucking left him a voice message about how to feel better. And then immediately when I was done, I was like, oh, gross, Ronald. And I texted him. I was like, or you can just ignore me because I'm full of shit and sorry. Yeah, so that is in there, Daniel.
Whoa, I was actually just kind of making a joke, but
every joke is based in sliver of truth.
All right, this is actually serious advice. I had a lover friend about a couple years ago, and they experienced pain with penetrative sex, and it makes me wonder if they were experiencing vaginismus, and they didn't use any words around it like that, and they seemed pretty perplexed by it. We never talked about it in detail, but I'm curious if you think it would be appropriate for me to somehow reach out and just be like, have you ever heard of this term? You know, I feel like that's invasive, but I also want to help them out potentially.
Yeah. I mean, they could have been experiencing vaginismus or a form of painful sex. There's a lot of different reasons why you can experience painful sex, whether it's from like endometriosis or from a trauma that it's occurred, and lots of different reasons. A lot of people though don't know that it's not normal. Which I think is a really sad thing, and that's something that I experienced. Is I just thought, well, is this what it is?
Just thought it was normal. I see.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't think it's normal, but I am curious. It's nice to know like that there are other reasons. I'm obviously pretty ignorant.
I think that shame keeps people really feeling like they're the unique flower of doom, and that they are uniquely qualified to suffer in that way. What was the endometriosis? How do you say that word?
Endometriosis.
Is that when the ovary like gets sick? And
that it's like, I don't know the clear definition of it, but it has to do with your ovaries and your uterus, and I believe it's something that ends up being on either on your ovaries or like on the external side of your uterus.
I had my ex-wife and she had a really intense experience with endometriosis, and it caused a lot of problems for her eventually, including ectopic pregnancy, which is awful. Yeah. As I understand it, and I'm not trying to mansplain anything here, I see it as an inflammation of parts of the reproductive system, and particularly, and I don't know if this is true, it's almost like the outside is trying to shed itself like the inside is supposed to shed itself.
That sounds more accurate to me than what I was trying to explain.
I had a girlfriend who had an ovary get twisted, and
Oh,
then died.
oh my
And
God.
because there was a growth on there that had like pushed it around, and the growth ended up being like the size of a grapefruit, like enormous.
Wow.
And it caused sex, early in our relationship to be really painful, and like
Oh my
tears,
God.
and like, oh God, what'd I do? And
Yeah.
finally,
Um,
Whoa.
we had to rush to the hospital because
Wow.
she was so sick from her ovary dying, and she was getting
Wow.
sick from that. It was an
Yeah,
infection.
that's what happens with ectopic pregnancies is it
Yes.
grows and grows, and it can end up essentially, as I understand it, bursting and
Jeez.
causing like
Yeah.
appendicitis death situation. We did the same
Yeah.
thing when Adria got
Mm.
pregnant. It was like we had to rush and I was such an asshole. She was
Mhm.
like, I don't feel good and I'm spotting. And I was like, it's probably fine, And it was like, she was like, no, I need to go. And I was like, okay, let's go. This is a long time ago. I would
Yeah.
never fucking do this now. This is like 10 years ago. And we go to the hospital and she was in life or death surgery within an hour. Yeah.
Wow.
It's the real deal.
Yeah.
Just trust your wife.
I think this is the thing with painful sex is there's so many unknowns about the female reproductive system and what it does if it doesn't do what it's meant to be doing. And so that's why there's just so like a lot of doctors don't know how to treat things correctly when it comes to painful sex. A lot of people get advice about like, oh, just drink more wine and relax and you'll be fine. And like, it's the worst advice a doctor could ever give.
I had a friend who went and talked to her doctor, and he literally gave her a Valium and said, he gave her a prescription of Valium and said, take this and drink wine. Right. And I'm like, he told you to roofie yourself?
Right.
Like that's like that's
well, you can
up.
see where that's coming from though. It's like they're trying to maybe say you just need to really relax your body. There could potentially be some truth to that in my mind, but like you're saying, it's not about that in the slightest.
Yeah, and I hate that they say that because it just perpetuates that story of well just relax so that the person you're having sex with can have sex, and it's like no, that's not what it's about. Like don't get me started on the patriarchy. That's a whole nother segment.
Fuck patriarchy. We'll go ahead and we'll agree with that.
It's tricky, right? I think that's the reason I don't want to reach out to this friend who experiences something like that, because it's like, I'm a man. Hey, I'm Ronald with his friend who's sick. He's like, I got something for you. And it's like, comes from a good place. You want to help someone, but also it's like, I don't know, I don't know anything about this. It's something I'm just learning about. And there's so much complexity and nuance, and it goes deep. And also it's kind of dumb to assume that this person who's into a lot of naturopathic medicine and wouldn't know that already. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that probably that can be the tricky thing. Like, I guess if you're not really in contact with that person and you don't really know if it's something that they're actively trying to resolve, it can almost be like just that awkward conversation where people go, oh, but have you tried this, when someone tells them about something that's ailing them and you go, yeah, but have you tried this? Or yeah, but have you tried that? And they're like, shut the fuck up. I've tried everything.
Like years ago.
She's like, Daniel, everything was fucking fine when you left.
I'm gonna actually, this is a side note. And I've heard a lot of stories of people who have experienced painful sex, and then they've left a relationship and then they've gone on to a new relationship with someone else and they don't experience the painful sex.
Interesting. What do you think that's about?
I think it can be about like how open or safe that you feel with a person.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that because you're not an open or a safe person, but like,
no, I definitely am.
Sometimes the painful sex can just be based on something that could be in the subconscious. It might not be from a physical trauma that has occurred. And they might not be experiencing it with somebody else. But so that's like, there's so many complexities to painful sex and why it happens and how it can happen and all those sorts of things.
It's a really interesting, very specific, right? But obviously so many reasons and nuance and complexity and past history. I mean, I just appreciate you talking about this in the world, and then specifically with a couple of dudes who like kind of have never experienced,
a couple knuckle draggers.
I mean, in some areas we really are like, I mean, I don't need to be talking to anybody about painful vaginal penetrative sex, so, and I had a partner recently was like, I've said, hey, do you recommend me and Ronald inviting this guest on the show? And it was like around an indigenous situation. And she was like, she's like, yeah, you're like a high school basketball player and you want to have a chat. You want to like play with Kobe and Shaq, you know? I was like, okay, fuck you. And also point taken.
And
so
yeah, but should we still have him on?
So like, you know, I think Ronald and I know where we stand here. And just, I think it is special to be able to participate in this conversation that's not private. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you guys are talking about this stuff, because you could just stick to the pretty typical manly topics or whatever and not open up the subject. But I don't know who your listeners are, but I mean, maybe there's someone out there who has a partner who's experiencing something like this. So it's going to help.
Very likely, yeah.
Shed a bit of light to them as to how that they could potentially support their partner and things like that. And I just think it's just such a topic that needs as much light as possible. Because even though we're in a much better place around painful sex than we were, like in terms of Google and information that's available and breaking the stigma around it, there's still so much more to go. It's still not better, like it still should be better from an educational perspective. So I love that I can come on and share my story and shed the light to another group of people who maybe haven't, heard of it before. So,
as a single man who is sexually active, it actually I can feel already, it would change my approach in having sex with anybody, because I would think that maybe I suspect there's degrees of painful sex, and maybe someone has just a little bit of that experience and they don't really mention it, and I just would think that it would be something good to know that's out in the world that people experience, potentially a lot of people, and to varying degrees, and maybe just I guess be aware.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's being aware and knowing that just because maybe someone can't have penetrative sex doesn't mean you can't have any sex at all.
Yeah.
Amen.
So it's redefining that as well. Like your sexual experience shouldn't just be based around penetration. It can be everything else and not that. And that's not going to take away from that experience.
Totally.
That is also another rich conversation that could be had. Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, as a person who used to be in Christian ministry, I want to tell you, you are doing the Lord's work.
He's like, thank you,
God.
See, I'm at a bit of a point where I'm like, I don't know if I want to be told that I'm doing the Lord's work.
Ronald likes to drop one really stupid comment every single show.
At least one.
That's good.
He also asked me to give him more shit on the show, so that came from a place of love, Ronald.
Oh man, thank you. Little Ronnie appreciates that.
Little Ronnie, that was a Ron moment. Don't try to pass the buck on to Ronnie. That was full Ron.
Jasmin, thank you for coming here. We really appreciate it. I'm delighted by your story, and I love your articulation around it and how you're helping people in it. It's kind of it, right? It's like your wound became an actual superpower, and sharing with it and talking about it is just spreading more of that healing out there. And it happens. That's what we get. Well, like Morgan and I had no idea. I don't even remember that podcast episode. I don't even know how that came up. And I'm humbled that that's what helped you, or one of the small things that helped you. Obviously there's a lot of stuff going on. So thank you. Thanks for showing up here, and thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? If a woman wants more of your advice and to follow you, or a dude is like, honey, you need to hear this lady, what do they do?
Or non-binary.
Exactly.
There's so many. Yeah.
Any human that would like to reach out or find what I do. I'm mostly on Instagram these days at Conscious Sexuality. I have a website which has info on there, but that I also do have my own podcast, which I haven't updated recently, but there's episodes on there that people can listen to, which I tell my story, or Dan tells his side of the story, just around multiple different topics. And that's just Conscious Sexuality, the podcast.
That's a strong podcast name.
Yeah. And so, I'm not doing any work with anyone at the moment, because I am currently pregnant and having a baby in December. So I am winding down on what I'm doing, but I still love it when people drop into my DMs. So
awesome. Congrats, by the way, on that baby.
Thank you.
When in December? What's it?
Around the 17th.
Okay, let's pull for 13 because that's Morgan's birthday. And
oh, yay!
And we get to share a birthday. Awesome.
Hey, one more question before we lose you here. Can you help Ronald and I with the origin story of you being on this podcast? Because I think that I was Googling sexuality coaches or sexuality something.
Yep.
And I found you, and then I DM'd you.
Yeah.
And then you said, "Oh, I really love Morgan and I work with Morgan. I would love to do this." That's how we started, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I just thought that was cool.
Dude, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That had
right. So Dan, you messaged me, but not off Ron's knowledge.
Not in the slightest.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that.
I just found you because I was
so
looking
good.
for people like you.
That's awesome.
Great. Well, I mean, I'm glad to know I come up in searches.
You're now a global authority on this.
Yeah. Also, Ronald, this is Jasmin. She's a conscious.
Hey, good to meet you. I'm really glad to meet you. You're helping me out. Sounds like I could probably take a few lessons from your husband.
Awesome.
That's good.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun.
It's
been super fun. I've really enjoyed myself. Thanks. And when you do get back on the podcast saddle, we'd love to have you back. Talk about what you're doing again.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right.
Would love it.
Take care, Jasmin. Field dressing number 40. 40. Go us, man. Jasmin Carman. She was fun, dude. That was a lot of fun.
We're starting to have a good theme of really good conversations with Australians.
Who,
by the way,
what are the other Australians?
Tracy Hunter.
Oh yeah. Tracy Hunter. Yeah, she was. Maybe we should have a board of Australia. I mean, that's funny to her and have her and Tracy. There should be maybe a few other
definitely
sexuality or something in that world where we just pepper them with questions. We ask for advice. That's what we should do.
we give advice like assholes.
Give advice. Give me your problem. I'm gonna give you.
I don't need to know your problems, but I definitely have advice for you.
I got so much to say right now.
So that way that I said Australians right there was a subtle show reference, by the way.
I didn't catch it. Sorry.
Flight of the Conchords, which I wanted to bring up at one point in time.
Man, I love that show.
Because you know how they rip Australians on
that show. Yeah. I'm disappointed I didn't catch that one because
Jermaine dates an Australian, Keitha. Do you remember that whole bit? It's really
Is that season 2?
I don't know. I don't watch it in seasons. I just watch YouTube clips.
Okay.
Which is a really interesting way to watch any show because you get it way out of order and then you start to slowly the bubbles make bigger bubbles and then you get it. It's like a nonlinear way to absorb a show. It's all good.
That is back to what Jasmin said is you get the punchlines, but you lost the plot.
That's true. You did. Oh, good reach around. That was a really good one.
Fuck yeah.
But the way that he says Australia, he is so in conflict with himself over dating an Australian because he really likes her that he can't say the word Australia when he says he's dating an Australian. So he can never quite get through the word.
Australian.
Australian.
Well, we should have more of them on because we're what's the give me a sport terminology that means we've hit bullseyes every time. What would that say? What's our come on, batting average? I don't know.
We're painting the edges, the strike zone. We're hitting dingers. We're hitting for the cycle. It's a touchdown every time. Thank
you. Sports terminology. If I had to do I would die if someone put a gun to my head and was started asking me that questions. I'd be like, I'm dead.
I really like sports, but I am ashamed of that. And I keep it, especially when I have a girlfriend that I really like that I love. I will keep my sports that I like sports from them because I don't want to be judged as a knucklehead sports fan because the way I like sports is I really like it. I love the stories. I get to know the people and the characters. I follow who they are, at least as best you can,
Yeah.
But I love it. I love the sport. I love the game. I don't like the bullshit of it, but I always feel ashamed about that.
Don't feel ashamed about this any longer, dude.
I've been
Did
doing
that help?
better.
Did that help me manage
You
yelling
yelling
at
at me
you,
to
telling
not
you not to do something anymore?
My
I'm sure
heart's
that was
going a little
perfect.
pitter patter. No, you're right though. I do have choice around that. I don't have. It's not so subconscious of a shame that I can't choose not to do. I can choose not to do it.
I think I intentionally tried to not like sports as a kid because I didn't play enough to be good. I had health problems as a child, asthma and allergies. It just kept me off the fields. And I would try and I would never play for more than a season or so. And I really, really regret having a lot of judgment around sports as a child. I wish I had done them more.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a judgment against competitiveness, but that's
Yeah.
only because competitiveness is so easily spoiled, and turned up too high.
Good call.
But
Yeah.
if you turn it down to the right frequency, it's lovely. It's good hearted, it's good natured, and it's actually, these days when I play a game, like I like to play games a lot, actually, like pool or snooker or like darts or anything. And I kind of have a little bit of skill around them. And so, but every time I get into a game, I always like want it to be a really close game,
Yeah.
I get really uncomfortable if I'm blowing someone out. I don't mind being blown out. I almost like that because someone's like doing a good job, but I'm still playing. It's like dichotomous. It's holding opposites. I'm really playing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's good natured.
I'm not competitive until suddenly I am. Like I get into a position and I didn't anticipate it. And I show up to whatever it's going to be and I'm like, I'm here. And then suddenly Ron is like, it's on. And we want to like win. We want to be the best.
That's probably, I mean, I don't know. It sounds like it's okay. And then it goes, and you try to crank it all the way up.
Yeah.
There's probably something there you could flesh out.
I felt like we missed something. We were on a path talking about Jasmine, our conversation.
She was great.
She was
awesome.
So great. Yeah.
That was a really engaging conversation.
So good. I want to reiterate that vaginismus and painful sex is really common. And if you know someone who's experiencing, like, go find help. There's plenty of resources. Like not you, Daniel, but like you, the listener.
No, I get it's just what you just did. It's slightly in the world. And I don't really know this, but you and I think that was a really good conversation for you and I to have because we talked about religion. We talked about sex. We talked about sex, particularly more centered around women rather than men. We're talking about a couple of areas that are either not really our forte or they are a little bit charged or a lot charged, And I think that it's good for us not to shy away, or for anybody to shy away from those conversations. And if you like at least me in this conversation, don't really have a lot of articulation around it, we might misstep, but I think that people will see what is coming from your heart and my heart. Like I am here for the promotion of people's health and well-being, all people, all life, it's a huge value of mine. I fuck up all the time, but I fuck up less than I did 6 months ago, every 6 months. But I still think it's cool that we jumped into that, because it's maybe 6 months ago I wouldn't have spoken, not maybe, 6 months ago I probably would have held my tongue on some of those topics. And you don't grow if you hold your tongue. And I think it's also valuable to have beginning fledgling conversation where you are learning and have that public. Whereas I've heard some people say, well, if you don't know what you're talking about, have those conversations in private. It doesn't need to be public. And it's like, I get what you're saying, but if you're having these conversations, I think like you and I are, with open heart, open mind, curious, it's okay to have them in public so people can see how they can potentially, hopefully, have those conversations and start those conversations for themselves, maybe in public, maybe in private. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And I don't think I can add anything to it. That's how much sense it made.
Honestly, I really, really feel grateful for that conversation.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really feeling it in the beginning because I don't know her,
Yeah.
And but wow, that was, I feel like she really provided an allowing, graceful, spacious, at times humorous space for you and I to kind of like dip our toes in some of these waters.
Totally. Totally. Let's do some more. How about 40 more? How about we do 40 more episodes and then we decide if we want to do another 40? Let's just start there.
No, you and I shook hands. We're doing 100. You've got me for 100, my friend.
A hundy. No,
we shook hands.
I know. It's I say 40 more, but my heart is
out.
No.
Trying to back out. No,
trying to sound funny, but my heart says I never want to stop. I got to take my wife and her girlfriend to the airport. They're headed somewhere, and our friend was asking me about the podcast, and I go, you know what, I am thoroughly addicted to hearing people's stories and hearing what makes them tick and hearing about their expertise and their experience, and I can't get enough of it. It is so fun. It is really, really enjoyable.
Today we talked to who is considered the best female rock climber in the world.
Yeah, all around rock climber. Like, she's really good at all the skills, so much so that like it kind of takes up most of the space.
Yeah, she would not like the statement I just said, but her contemporaries, who are some of the best,
who are the best in the world,
you get a quote by Alex Honnold,
or Tommy Caldwell,
come on, and he's like, she's the best. It's like, sorry, Michael Jordan just said you're the best. You're the best.
That's right.
And she was in Austria, and then we took a few hour break and did our thing, and then we spoke to a conscious sexuality coach in Australia. Like, what a cool day,
dude, what a cool day. Thank God we live in this time zone. We'd have to be doing this with carrier pigeons in the past, and it would take forever.
Podcasts via like carrier pigeons.
we send the questions back and forth, and then our subscribers eventually get a pigeon at their door with a little.
What I just had that scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail when they got the coconuts and the pit and the carrier. the bird is like the coconut. So funny. I need to watch that again and get some of those references queued up. But anyways, awesome. I love it. I love you. She was a really special human.
Yeah. Love you too, man. Appreciate this. See you next time.